Prime Minister, after the Port Arthur massacre, John Howard went to rallies, he engaged face-to-face in the community, even after the bushfires. Scott Morrison, went down to the South Coast and got some tough feedback. My question is, why haven't you attended any of the funerals? Why have you been saying that you weren't invited? Generally, the process is that the Prime Minister's office reaches out to the families and asks permission respectfully to attend. And will you be returning to Bondi to meet with victims face-to-face, even if that means receiving some really tough criticism?
I have done that. I haven't just been down in Bondi on Monday morning when at what is now the large memorial. Very early on, I met with police. I've met with members of the community. I've been to homes in Bondi. Just on Tuesday, I visited the home of Rabbi Mandel Castell, met with families grieving, going through complete trauma, and I understand that.
Have you asked to attend a funeral?
I met with the families there and have spoken to them. I certainly, I respect the wishes of families.
So they told you not to attend?
I respect the wishes of families, and I will continue to engage with the community. I met with the community leaders and members last night. On the night before, I was with grieving families as well and community leaders at Admiralty House. Each and every day I've met face to face with people who are going through the worst of grieving processes as well, and I'll continue to engage with them.
Prime Minister, these hate speech changes, will they capture slogans like "from the river to the sea" and globalise the Intifada?
The hate speech laws obviously will set a test, and I'm not going to be in the business of that, but if I put it in these terms, we have all seen vision of hate preachers where we are shocked that that is happening in Australia. It is not representative of what people expect in Australia, and it's certainly not representative of the Muslim community in Australia either. There have been repeated checks as to whether they have crossed legal thresholds. They haven't. The thresholds are changing.
Commissioner, can I ask a question to Commissioner Barrett, please? Thanks, Commissioner. Just a two-part question. Would your job and that of your organisation have been made easier had these changes announced today been implemented earlier, like 2 years ago? And secondly, do you have any indication whether the Acronyms undertook military training in the Philippines? The Filipino government says they didn't.
So to answer the first part of your question first, which is in relation to the legislation, we have had a significant number of investigations since the legislation came into force, both through Operation Avalite, which was stood up 12 months ago specifically to target anti-Semitic alleged offences, and also through our National Security Investigations teams, which I set up when I started as the Commissioner. And unfortunately, those teams have been extremely busy. There's a lot of work for them to do. So we have had time to work with the legislation and some of the prosecutions. That's how we find out where the deficiencies or the vulnerabilities are in the legislation. So we've now had some time to work through that. And of course, we then provide advice back to government in relation to how the legislation is working. As the Minister has commented on quite strongly, for us the challenge has been around some of the thresholds, and we certainly welcome the reform around the thresholds, which will allow us to apply the legislation. To your second part of the question, I'm not in a position, unfortunately, to answer that. We now have a matter before court. Last I checked, there was still a suppression order in place as well, so I unfortunately can't answer that question.
Commissioner Barrett, some commentary of your observation that these attacks were not about religion. Do you care to expand on that, or what exactly you were trying to say?
So what we know, and I'll be careful again because we've got matters before court and I don't want to go into detail, this was about extremism. This was ISIS inspired. We know ISIS distorts and corrupts Islam, which leads to radicalisation. The point I was making is that these two we know were inspired by ISIS.
In terms of radicalisation, we've heard from the ACO Director General that the speed is increasing a lot. Are you able to speak to how fast some of these people were radicalised, whether we're talking months or years, given that property was transferred. There's reports that property was transferred. And also, do you suspect any third nation involvements like Iran?
To answer the first part of your question, our investigation is still in its very early stages. So there is a lot to work through, and that will form part of it. I will just make a general comment about radicalisation in general. Again, Director General and I have both been on the record talking about the pace with which we're seeing particularly young people be radicalised in the current environment, and that is a challenge shared again by our overseas partners as well. The legislation in relation to violent extremist material has been an extremely useful piece of legislation for us since it came into effect, because what that has allowed us to do is to get in early on the radicalisation pathway and put people either before court or disrupt their behaviour at a very early stage.